I think it's absolutely extraordinary that any right-minded thinking parent should believe would have been an alternative.
The royal family rarely exposes their private struggles, but recently, Princess Anne dropped a revelation that has left everyone reeling. What devastating news has she just revealed about Prince William's child? How could this tragic announcement shake the family and change everything for the young prince? Stay with us as we uncover the full story behind Princess Anne's startling disclosure and its ripple effects across the monarchy. All eyes on the prince. For a child born into one of the most photographed families in the world, Prince Louis has become known for something unexpected: his absence. Not his physical absence, though that too has been noted, but his quietness, his distance from the spotlight. And that difference has fueled months, now years, of speculation. Prince Louis, the youngest child of Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, has always been described as spirited when he was younger. Early public appearances showed him pulling faces on palace balconies, reacting openly to noise and crowds, and behaving like a typical energetic toddler. But as time passed, something shifted. While Prince George grew into a visibly composed heir in training, and Princess Charlotte emerged as poised, expressive, and increasingly confident in public, Louis appeared to retreat. And when he did appear, he often looked serious, withdrawn, or hyper-focused on a single object rather than engaging with the crowd. Social media noticed, and the question persisted: why does Prince Louis seem so different? Officially, there was nothing unusual here. Prince William and Catherine have been clear that they want a normal childhood for their children. They have restricted press access, reduced exposure, and actively limited how often their children are photographed outside of official engagements. But even within those boundaries, comparisons are inevitable. Prince George attends public events with increasing frequency, preparing for his future role. Princess Charlotte is often photographed smiling, waving, and interacting confidently with the public. She appears comfortable in crowds, attentive to protocol, and unusually mature for her age. Prince Louis, by contrast, is often missing entirely. When he is present, he is rarely front and center. He doesn't wave as much. He doesn't engage the cameras. He doesn't mirror the rehearsed composure of his siblings. Instead, he stays close, quiet, sometimes stiff, sometimes distant. For many parents watching, this doesn't look alarming. It looks familiar. It looks like a child who experiences the world differently. The patterns people point to include sensitivity to loud environments, a preference for staying close to trusted figures, reduced engagement with unfamiliar crowds, limited expressive gestures during public appearances, and a tendency to focus inward rather than outward. None of these are diagnostic indicators on their own, but in the age of social media, patterns do not need to be clinical to be believed, especially when something like this has happened before in the royal family. What many people forget, or are only just learning, is that autism is not unprecedented in the British royal family. Lady Louise Windsor, daughter of Prince Edward and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, is confirmed to be autistic. This information has been publicly acknowledged and discussed respectfully by her parents, particularly Sophie, who has spoken openly about neurodiversity, early intervention, and understanding children's unique needs. Lady Louise grew up largely outside the public spotlight. Her parents deliberately chose to shield her from excessive media exposure, allowing her to develop at her own pace, on her own terms. Public appearances were limited. Privacy was prioritized. Sound familiar? Royal watchers have drawn parallels between Lady Louise's upbringing and Prince Louis's increasingly low-profile presence, not because the situations are identical, but because the strategy looks similar. When a royal child may require additional space, structure, or protection, the palace does not announce it. It adjusts behavior instead, and the public is left to notice the gaps. Perhaps the most emotionally compelling element of the speculation surrounding Prince Louis is not his behavior alone, but Princess Charlotte's. Time and time again, cameras have caught Charlotte subtly positioning herself between Louis and the crowd, guiding him, correcting him gently, watching him closely. In several public moments, she seems less like a sibling and more like a guardian. Royal analysts have noted that Charlotte often holds Louis's hand as they move through crowds, signals him when to stand still or move, maintains awareness of his surroundings, and steps in when he appears overwhelmed. Some dismiss this as a coincidence. Others see it as an older sister's natural instinct. But many parents, especially those with neurodivergent children, recognize the dynamic instantly. It looks like learned protectiveness. Children don't usually take on that role unless they've seen a need for it, and Charlotte does it consistently. One reason these rumors persist and resonate is that autism is no longer viewed as a taboo condition. It is understood as a spectrum, not a limitation. In fact, some supporters argue that if Prince Louis were neurodivergent, it would align with Prince William and Catherine's public advocacy for mental health awareness, inclusivity, and child well-being. They have repeatedly spoken about emotional development, early childhood support, and the importance of understanding children as individuals rather than as projections of expectations. But then, could Louis's calm and careful nature hint at something deeper? And how does it compare to past generations of royals? Baby brain or something more? Long before Prince Louis became the question mark of the royal family, there was a moment, brief, almost forgettable at the time, that would later be revisited with very different eyes. A comment attributed to Meghan Markle, a reaction from Catherine, Princess of Wales, and a phrase that sounded harmless on the surface but lingered far longer than anyone expected: baby brain. When the story first circulated, it was framed as a social misstep. Meghan, newly pregnant and adjusting to royal life, was said to have joked that Kate had a baby brain, a colloquial phrase often used to describe forgetfulness during pregnancy or early motherhood. According to reports, the comment did not land well. Kate was reportedly hurt. The moment was folded neatly into the larger narrative of tension between the two women and eventually buried beneath far louder controversies. At the time, no one treated it as anything more than awkwardness. But hindsight has a way of reopening doors that were never fully closed. Because years later, as speculation around Prince Louis quietly grows, that comment has begun to feel different. And people are starting to ask whether baby brain was really what Meghan meant, or whether it was the closest socially acceptable phrase she could reach for in a moment she didn't fully know how to navigate. From the moment Catherine entered royal life, she has been described using the same words over and over again: reserved, controlled, emotionally contained, highly structured. She is praised for her composure, her consistency, her ability to perform flawlessly in public without visible cracks. She is not impulsive. She does not improvise well on camera. Her strength has always been preparation, repetition, and discipline. She follows protocol meticulously. She adheres to routines. She appears most comfortable when expectations are clear and variables are limited. None of this is criticism. In fact, many people watching now recognize something else in those traits, something that, until recently, was rarely discussed in women at all. Because autism, especially in women, does not look the way people expect. For decades, autism was narrowly defined through a male lens: social withdrawal, lack of empathy, and obvious communication difficulties. But modern understanding has shifted dramatically. We now know that many women on the spectrum are highly functional, deeply empathetic, socially capable, and extremely skilled at masking. So could it be that Meghan saw something different? Meghan Markle came into the royal family from a very different world: Hollywood, media, fast adaptation, improvisation, emotional openness. She is expressive, reactive, and verbally fluid. She reads rooms quickly and responds instinctively. Kate does not. If Meghan, newly inside the palace, encountered a Kate who seemed rigid, overwhelmed, or slow to adjust during pregnancy and early motherhood, she may have reached for the closest socially acceptable explanation available. Baby brain is a polite euphemism that softens observation and makes things seem temporary. But what if Meghan sensed something deeper and didn't yet have the language or the permission to say it? If Kate does carry these traits, whether fully on the spectrum or simply with overlapping characteristics, the possibility that Louis will inherit a more visible expression of them is significant. Autism and related neurodivergent traits are often hereditary, and it is not uncommon for traits to manifest differently across generations. A parent may manage them subtly and successfully, while a child may express them more openly or intensely, especially in high-stimulus environments like public life. This could explain why Lewis appears quieter, more reserved, and carefully monitored in public appearances. Charlotte's consistent protective behavior toward her younger brother also fits a plausible family dynamic. Siblings often mirror the family's adaptive strategies, especially when a child shows vulnerability or needs additional emotional support. Charlotte's attentiveness may be instinctive, learned from observing her parents, or a combination of both. Now, if Meghan's words revealed traits that run in the family, how might that connect to the hidden challenges Kate has faced in her own health? A secret battle. In mid-January 2024, Kensington Palace released a short, carefully worded statement that immediately raised questions. Catherine, Princess of Wales, had undergone planned abdominal surgery at the London clinic. The palace emphasized that the procedure had been successful and that her condition was non-cancerous. The statement also noted that Catherine would remain hospitalized for up to 2 weeks and would not return to public duties until after Easter. Even though the detailing stood out, as senior royals rarely announce recovery timelines, unless the situation is significant, the reassurance was calming enough and widely accepted. But as January turned into February, something began to feel off. Not only did Catherine not appear in public, but no photographs of her were released, not even to show that her health was improving. There was an unusual, total visual silence, and it didn't take long before rumors began to circulate online. Some believed she had developed complications from the surgery, while others thought it had nothing to do with her health and more to do with her marital life. They believed the whole announcement had been a cover to stop the public from scrutinizing the princess, who was having issues with Prince William. Those theorists couldn't have been farther from the truth. On March 22, 2024, Catherine broke the silence herself. In a recorded video message, she revealed that cancer had been found following her surgery and that she was undergoing preventative chemotherapy. She described the diagnosis as a huge shock and spoke openly about the difficulty of navigating the news while still recovering physically from surgery. It turned out the palace had said nothing because Catherine had asked them not to. She wanted time to explain it privately to her children before making any public statement. Even when she eventually made it public, Kate was careful with her choice of words. Preventative chemotherapy suggested early detection, but it also confirmed that the cancer was serious enough to require aggressive treatment. Catherine didn't disclose the type of cancer, its stage, or prognosis. The palace made it clear that those details would remain private, and what followed was a prolonged period of treatment. From late March through the summer of 2024, Catherine remained largely out of public view. During this time, the lack of information became a story in itself, but the reality of chemotherapy rarely fits clean timelines. Side effects fluctuate, energy levels rise and crash unpredictably. Recovery from abdominal surgery combined with cancer treatment compounds physical strain. When she eventually reappeared in limited public footage later in 2024, Kate had visibly changed drastically. She had lost a lot of weight, and even though she still appeared composed, something had changed. Soon after, it was confirmed that Catherine had completed her course of chemotherapy. But it was in early 2025 that the public finally sighed with relief. Catherine announced that she was in remission. Although remission does not mean cured, but instead means that cancer is no longer detectable. At present, it was still a sign of a significant difference. Again, the wording was deliberate. Remission does not mean cured. It means cancer is no longer detectable at present. It marks the end of active treatment, not the end of monitoring or fear. Catherine herself acknowledged this reality, stating that the post-treatment phase brought its own challenges, and that recovery was not linear. Even after entering remission, Catherine did not immediately resume a full public schedule. Instead, she continued resting and managing the challenges of the post-cancer phase, where every ache raised concern and lifestyle changes had to be made. As Catherine fought her private battle, what did it mean when the king himself quietly faced a life-changing diagnosis? The king's lasting battle. Just as the public was trying to make sense of Catherine's health issues, Buckingham Palace made an announcement that left people wondering what might be in the royal waters. First, it was said that King Charles III had to undergo a corrective procedure for an enlarged prostate, a condition that is quite common amongst men of his age. The statement framed it as benign, and the king was said to have temporarily postponed public engagements to fully recover. However, just a month later, another statement was released, one that shook the royal officials. It appeared that during treatment for the prostate condition, doctors had identified a separate form of cancer. The palace was careful to clarify that the cancer was not prostate cancer, but beyond that, no specifics were given regarding type, stage, or prognosis. The king had already begun treatment. He remained wholly positive, the statement said, and he intended to continue state business where possible. But the reality was unavoidable. Britain's reigning monarch had cancer. Unlike the earlier announcement, this one landed heavily. The shift from routine procedure to cancer diagnosis was abrupt, and the palace offered no timeline explaining when the cancer was discovered or how advanced it was. What was clear was that the diagnosis emerged during medical intervention for another condition, an echo of how unexpected cancer often is, even under careful medical supervision. As weeks passed, updates were minimal. Buckingham Palace did not provide regular medical briefings. Instead, information emerged indirectly through scheduling changes, cancelled engagements, and brief confirmations that treatment was continuing. This lack of detail fueled speculation, but it also aligned with how the royal family has historically handled cancer news, with privacy and limited disclosure. The king's diagnosis quietly reopened an old conversation that has followed the royal family for decades. Throughout Queen Elizabeth II's later years, rumors persisted that she had been battling cancer. These claims were never officially confirmed during her lifetime, and palace statements consistently attributed her declining health to mobility issues and age-related concerns. However, following her death in September 2022, commentary from biographers and commentators reignited speculation that cancer may have been involved, possibly undiagnosed publicly or managed privately. By mid-2024, reports confirmed that the king was responding well to treatment and was able to resume limited public duties. Observers noted physical changes, such as weight loss and visible fatigue, but the palace maintained its position. Treatment was ongoing, progress was being made, and optimism remained. However, what stood out was the absence of a clear endpoint. Unlike some public cancer disclosures that end in announcements of remission or completed treatment, the king's situation remained open-ended. Statements referred to continuing treatment rather than recovery. This ambiguity suggested a long-term management approach rather than a finite course. As 2024 gave way to 2025, the king continued to balance treatment with duty. He returned selectively to public life while maintaining medical privacy. Whether the cancer will fully recede, remain managed, or define the later years of the king's reign remains unknown. What is clear is that the diagnosis followed a familiar royal pattern, discovered incidentally, disclosed sparingly, and carried privately. With cancer touching both sides of the family, could the next generation be at risk? And how worried is Princess Anne about the future of the heir? A scary future. Within royal circles, illness is never viewed in isolation. It is weighed not only for its human cost, but for its implications on duty, succession, and institutional stability. This is why the growing conversation around the possibility of Prince William's children facing serious illness later in life has unsettled senior members of the family, particularly Princess Anne, whose reputation for realism and long-term thinking is well established. On one side, there is the king. King Charles III's cancer diagnosis introduced an undeniable hereditary question into the royal bloodstream. While the palace emphasized that his cancer was not prostate-related and provided few details, its existence alone altered the family's internal calculations. Cancer is not always hereditary in a simple or predictable way, but its recurrence within a family line inevitably invites concern. especially when coupled with advancing medical transparency. On the other side, there is Catherine, Princess of Wales. Kate's cancer diagnosis further complicated the picture. While she has since returned gradually to royal life, the reality remains that both families of the future monarch have now faced cancer diagnoses before old age. For Princess Anne, this is not a matter of speculation or sentimentality. It is a matter of institutional endurance. Anne has long been known as the royal most concerned with continuity, preparation, and the mechanics that keep the monarchy functioning, regardless of personal circumstance. She has lived through abdication, divorce scandals, sudden deaths, and the collapse of public trust. She understands how quickly a stable system can be strained. From her perspective, the issue is not whether cancer will affect William's children, but what happens if it does, and how that would cascade through the line of succession. Prince William occupies a uniquely burdened position. He is not merely the next king, he is the sole stabilizing bridge between an aging monarch and a future generation still in childhood. If his wife were to face prolonged illness, and if one or more of his children were later to face serious health challenges, the cumulative strain could fundamentally impair his ability to rule effectively. This is the scenario that reportedly troubles Anne, not because it is likely, but because it is conceivable. Royal history offers no shortage of cautionary examples. Monarchs whose personal lives were overwhelmed by illness, either their own or their families, often ruled distracted, constrained, or dependent on regents and advisors. If William were forced to divide his attention between the crown, a seriously ill spouse, and children facing health crises, the pressure would be unprecedented in the modern monarchy. Princess Anne, in particular, understands that the monarchy has little tolerance for prolonged vulnerability at the top. Public sympathy has limits. Compassion can quickly turn into scrutiny, and scrutiny into destabilization. A monarch perceived as distracted or overwhelmed, however unfairly, becomes a focal point for doubt. The concern extends beyond cancer itself. Serious childhood illness of any kind demands time, emotional bandwidth, and privacy. It reshapes priorities. It forces difficult decisions about exposure and duty. Even the possibility of such a future requires planning, contingency, and discretion. What makes the situation more sensitive is the age of William's children. George, Charlotte, and Louis are still forming their identities under intense public observation. Any suggestion of hereditary vulnerability risks subjecting them to invasive speculation long before they are equipped to handle it. The palace is acutely aware of this, which is why no such discussion is ever acknowledged publicly. But internally, according to royal observers, the conversation exists, especially with an unavoidable question: how much strain can one individual absorb before the institution itself begins to bend? A heavy crown. For Prince William, the past 2 years have been a period unlike any other in his life. The public sees a composed, dutiful heir, capable of balancing appearances, charity work, and state responsibilities. But behind the perfectly tailored suits and polite smiles lies a more complex and private reality: the relentless pressure of being expected to remain unshakable while everything closest to him faces fragility. When Catherine, Princess of Wales, was diagnosed with cancer following her planned abdominal surgery, the news was more than alarming for William. It was destabilizing. As the father of 3 young children and heir to the throne, he suddenly found himself balancing 2 competing imperatives: his duty to the monarchy and his responsibility to his family. Almost immediately, William began stepping back from some public engagements, choosing private moments with his wife and children over ceremonial appearances. Every cancellation, every missed public event, was not a retreat from duty, but a deliberate attempt to protect the family he knew would need him more than the world would ever understand. This personal sacrifice reminded him of the traumatic death of his mother, Princess Diana. William has carried the memory of losing her in a sudden, public tragedy for decades, shaping the way he approaches crises. He knows too well the dangers of public exposure during moments of personal vulnerability. Diana's death left him with a deep understanding that grief can be magnified when the world watches, scrutinizes, and misinterprets every gesture. That experience has informed how he handled Catherine's illness, guiding him to a space of private management, careful shielding, and cautious disclosure. Yet shielding and managing come at a cost. William faces this burden largely alone. His role as heir requires him to maintain stability for the monarchy, the public, and the institution itself, but that stability is often achieved through personal isolation. He cannot share his deepest fears, not fully, even with those closest to him. He has a sibling, Prince Harry, who once might have been the confidant and companion in childhood and adolescence. But distance, historical friction, and public scrutiny have rendered that outlet largely unavailable. The brotherly bond that could have provided solace now exists only in fractured glimpses. For someone who bears responsibility for the continuity of an entire nation, the loneliness of unshareable burdens is profound. Unlike a private citizen, he cannot delegate these worries or even share them candidly with advisors who manage public duties rather than intimate emotional concerns. Even among trusted household staff and senior royals, discussions of fear or vulnerability are tempered by protocol, tradition, and the unspoken rules of restraint. And now, the speculation about the health of his own children adds a new layer of anxiety. Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis are still young, still developing, and yet William cannot escape the possibility that one or more of them could face serious illness in the future. This knowledge magnifies the pressure he already feels as heir, not only to fulfill the duties of the crown himself, but to remain emotionally available and physically present for those who could need him most at home. Yet there are moments, fleeting though they may be, when the human weight shows. Observers note subtle shifts in posture, the fatigue that cannot be hidden in brief public appearances, and the intensity in his interactions with his children. In private, those closest to him say that William's resilience is grounded not in lack of fear, but in the careful management of it. In the moments, William faces the same human truths as anyone in his position: fear, grief, isolation, and the profound longing for connection. But unlike most, his choices carry consequences beyond the personal. Every decision to prioritize one role over another ripples across a family, a lineage, and an institution centuries in the making. In these private spaces of reflection, he remains alone, carrying memories of loss, the weight of ongoing illness, and the responsibility for a future that, no matter what happens, will rest largely on his shoulders. Do you think Prince Louis's quiet nature is hereditary, or just his personality? And with both Catherine and King Charles facing serious health issues, can William truly balance duty and family? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.